welcome to the Fretboard Journal Guitar Podcast. I am your host, Jason Verlinde, the founder and editor of the Fretboard Journal. We put out a magazine, of course, but this podcast is where every week I get to introduce you to some of the guitar universe's most interesting people. Thank you for tuning in. And this week I'm talking to Meg Duffy, a guitarist who's played with a whole bunch of great artists like The War on Drugs, Kevin Morby, Christian Lee Hutson, and Perfume Genius, but they also create utterly gorgeous music as hand habits. This was a fun interview. We cover a lot of ground. We talk a little bit about gear, and if I'm being totally honest, I hope somebody walks away from this interview feeling a little inspired. Whether you're like Meg, taking up guitar, even if you didn't take it up when you were a little kid, being out there, putting yourself out there, playing with whoever you can play with, or maybe you'll be like Meg's uncle and just turn somebody you love onto guitar, unlock a few things for them. There's a lot to digest in this podcast. I hope you enjoy it. As we mentioned during the interview, if you want to see what all the fuss is about, you can go to Spotify, or you can go over to KEXP's YouTube channel and watch a couple of videos featuring Meg filmed here in Seattle, one with Hand Habits, one with Perfume Genius. I'll include links to those in the show notes. Now, after you hear this interview, a whole bunch of you are going to run out the door and buy Silly Putty. You'll understand that soon enough. Remember to tag us if you do post about it. I want to hear your take on that. And our 53rd issue of the magazine, I am happy to announce, is now mailing Ben Harper, Joanna Sternberg, the really wild 12-string guitar once owned by the late, great Robbie Basho, and so many other features are inside that issue. It's as much a coffee table book as it is a magazine. If you're an existing subscriber, you know that already, but I hope you will check it out. You can subscribe on fretboardjournal.com. Yes, we do gift subscriptions as well, and we will save a copy for you. We also have new episodes of the Truth About Vintage Amps podcast you should check out. We just posted a Luthier on Luthier podcast with builder Chris Mirabella. He gave us a mini masterclass on New York arch chops and their lineage, John D'Angelico, D'Acquisto, all that good stuff. And last week, I interviewed a yogi on this show, Guru Singh, and a bunch of you thanked me for the breathing exercises mentioned on that episode. So let the record show. In our 18-year run, the Fretboard Journal has never shared tab or scale exercises once, or any of the typical guitar magazine things, but we did once have a breathing tutorial, and that was just last week. Yesterday, I was visiting our friends at Seattle's own Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar. What an incredible vintage instrument store. They are sponsoring the podcast once again. Everybody should be following them, and if you need any work done to your acoustic or electric guitar, or even your amp, they have you covered. They have an incredible service department. Tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. We are also brought to you by Stringjoy Strings. You can use the discount code FRETBOARD when you check out for 10% off of your first order there. As you hopefully know, they've got new mandolin strings they're making now. And over on Pay Kid Nation, you can find a dozen or so of my personal favorite musicians giving online lessons across a wide variety of instruments. It is a beautiful place. You can get your first month free or $20 off of any annual subscription with the promo code FRETBOARD when you check out. Last, but definitely not least, if you're into home recording, if you're dabbling in engineering, our pals at Isotope and Native Instruments have huge discounts on everything from Guitar Rig 7, Complete 14 bundles, and Ozone 11 EQ. Go to isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com to learn more. Tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. And now, without any further delays, here is my talk with the one and only Meg Duffy. Hey, Meg, how are you?
I'm great. Enjoying this morning. How are you?
I'm good. As with a lot of these things, I hope the best conversation didn't happen before we hit record, but we've been talking for a few minutes.
We can reenact it. It'll be fine.
Okay. You were just on the road. Who were you with, and what did that look like?
Well, it was all with my band Hand Habits. Mm-hmm. And I did 3 months. It was September was East Coast. It was a headline tour, and I had it was the first time with the band on this particular band on the East Coast. It's a 4-piece. It was me, Alan Weifels, Jen Wasner, and Andy Stack, and those two play in Y Oak. I've played with Jen in a lot of different iterations, and Alan plays in Perfume Genius as well. And it was super fun. It was really fun. just the four of us. And I played in my hometown. That was really overwhelming. It's the first time I played there in maybe 4 years. And I saw a bunch of cousins I had never met before. They were like, "Where are your cousins?" And I was like, "I know, you look exactly like me." It was so wild. They all had these like gummy smiles. Thank God I didn't see this on the podcast, but they're like, "Hi, we're your cousins." I was like, clearly. And then October, I went to the UK solo, also headline, and I hate the UK. Sorry to all of you Brits out there.
Yeah, what's going on over there?
It's just not for me. I've been converted to a West Coast climate person. I like the sun. And I kept saying that to the crowd, and they like it. They kind of liked to be, I feel like Hand Habits fans are like dads, a lot of fathers, and then like they're kind of like trans millennial kids.
Okay. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cool crossover. Mm-hmm. A lot of like family therapy energy happening. Mm-hmm. And I would say to them, I wish I could say I was happy to be here, but I'm not. It's awful here. I don't know how people live here. And they really like that. There was a couple nights, like, some guy was like, "Then leave, like if you don't like it." And I was joking. It was a very, very lovely tour. I just am such a baby for the cold. I don't like the cold, and it was freezing. But the shows were great. The London show was like my favorite. And I love playing solo too. After playing with a band and then playing solo can always be a little rocky. But I get so much more freedom, and I can kind of do whatever I want and draw sections out. And I was trying a lot of new things and playing some new songs, and it felt really for me in a different way.
Yeah. Do you change the instrument you bring, whether it's the solo Hand Habits versus the band?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So on the band tours, I've been trying to minimize, because I don't have a tech or anything, and it's a very humble operation for Hand Habits, and I've been trying to minimize the amount of guitars I bring and change, because it cuts into the set time and I have to tune and all of that stuff. And then I end up talking way more than I already do talk, which is already too much. And so for the band, I was playing my old style baritone that Ruben built. And it's like this old Teisco that I love so much. It's like got the silver pick guard on it. And it's a rubber bridge, and I love that guitar. And then I bring my Strat, that is the first guitar that I ever had, like that I bought with my own money. It's a American Strat that was like the Lone Star Strat, but it's so, I'll show you it, but it's like so modded out beyond belief, because as soon as I moved here and like met all the people who mod out guitars, I was like, I didn't even know that was allowed, and yeah, my buddy Wiley like put this crazy pick guard on it without my consent, and but I bring that one. It still has the humbucker in it. It's like a Seymour Duncan humbucker, and then there's a gold foil in the neck. And I also have the GK pickup on it. And so I bring that with the band. And then sometimes I'll bring my telly too. It's a G&L ASA telly. My Uncle Joey gave it to me. It's like got the like bowling ball finish. It's like kind of corny, but I like it. But then solo, I'll just bring the Strat and the baritone, but sometimes I'll change it up. Jim James gave me one of his like signature models. It's like this huge hollow body. I look ridiculous playing it because I'm very tiny. So it looks sort of like it's like huge. It looks oversized. Or I'll bring my Gelber too that Wiley made for me. It's a white Strat, and it has Bill Lawrence pickups in it and a P90, and it's really, really cool.
Okay, we got way ahead of ourselves.
All right,
in the gearhead talk. You talked about going back and playing your hometown for the first time in a few years.
Yeah.
You're now in LA.
Correct.
But you grew up in upstate New York?
Yeah, that's right.
And I was reading some interviews with you in preparation for this. I love your music. I want to talk about the duo record that just came out, but it seems like in a relatively short amount of time, you went from taking up guitar to like, I'm going to go play out. I'm going to go make music, because you took up guitar kind of late, right?
It was kind of late. Yeah. I was like 16 and I started smoking pot around the same time.
Yeah.
And then didn't play. Like I wasn't somebody who got stoned and played. I would get stoned and like eat Oreos and not play. So yeah, I didn't start taking it really seriously until I was like 17. But then something switched and I was just totally obsessed.
What made you buy that Strat?
I went to Parkway Music in Clifton Park, which was the original location. It's this little music store, with my Uncle Richard, and he passed away last year actually, but he was a luthier. And he was like, you need a real electric guitar. Because my dad had bought me this little Austin. It was like this purple Austin Strat. And yeah, my Uncle Richard was like, you need to be playing on something that is going to like play with you. And so we went, and the only sort of reference point that I had for guitar heroes was Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Okay.
And so that was like, it was like Stevie Ray Vaughan and like maybe Jimmy Page, but I was like really into the blues and really into like jamming in that sense. And so, yeah, I knew I wanted a Strat, and yeah, I went there and played a bunch of them. And it was just that feeling of when you like a guitar that finds you, kind of. I didn't want a sunburst guitar. I was like, I don't want that. It's corny. Like I wanted like the Mark Knopfler model, but that was really expensive. And so it just, yeah, I like, it's got a sort of a little bit of a fatter neck on it. And it just found me, I guess.
So did you take to guitar pretty quickly? I mean, are you self-taught or?
I played drums like in middle school and high school and stuff because we had to choose an instrument. And my Uncle Joey showed me the pentatonic scale, and I think that I picked it up kind of quick. It just sort of made sense to me. It sounds sinister to say, but I could get the sense that I picked it up quickly based off of the way that the like adults were like, how did you learn that fast? And it was kind of the first time in my life that like, and I don't mean this in a like tiny violin way, but I had a kind of like rough upbringing, and my mom passed away when I was really young, and I lived with a lot of different people growing up. And so I always had this sense that like I was in the way, even though that wasn't true. It was just what I had sort of gleaned from moving around a lot and living with a bunch of different families. And it was the first time that it felt like I was kind of like allowed to take up space in this way. And I think that was really formative for me too. And it gave back. It was something that I could focus on by myself and practice. And like, I would have this world that I could go into that was so new and like so private, like, you know, in my room playing, and I wasn't like doing something wrong. You know, it was like something that was positive to spend my time with. And then also, especially with my uncles, like they were so encouraging, and they were like, you're you know, like it was a positive reinforcement thing. And I think it really struck with me, and it helped sort of, and I don't know why it feels sinister. I think just because I don't want it to sound like I played guitar for the wrong reasons, but it was kind of what saved my life in a way, because it gave me like sort of this purpose, and it connected me to people that I think at that age feel uncertain of how to connect with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for that reason in a lot of ways. And then I went to college and studied guitar performance at community college in upstate New York. And it just, it became sort of my whole life.
Were there things that unlocked guitar for you beyond learning a little bit of the pentatonic scale from your uncle?
Like back then?
Yeah. Or were you just like, I'm going to figure this thing out and sitting in a bedroom and just working on it?
I mean, when I was in college, I had a pretty good teacher. His name was Sten Isaacson. He was like not easily impressed. And it was a kind of a wake up call too, to be around all of these men who were so good at guitar already. And I was the only non-male person in my program, and definitely had a bit of like big fish syndrome at that point, because I was like jamming with my uncle in the garage. And Sten was not easily amused, and he was a bluegrass player. And my focus in college was like pick style, and it was a lot of like Paganini, and I really didn't like it. And I didn't even really enjoy the chordal melody stuff. Like it was hard. Like I wasn't used to working that hard at music. And I definitely resented it quite a bit. But then I met these guys who played metal, actually. And a friend of mine, and they were like in the same program, but they also had their own bands outside that was really like, it was like cool metal to me back then.
Yeah.
And this one guy, Jesse, showed me this book that he had that was like this secret book, that it was a photocopied. I still have it, and I know the person who wrote it probably. And it was like, he was like, don't tell anyone you have this, it's like, it was like passed down through guitar teachers. And it was the Beato book, Rick Beato.
Uh-huh.
And now he's like super successful and has like millions of YouTube subscribers, and is like, I can barely follow the book then. I can't really follow it that well now. Uh-huh. And I can't really follow his YouTubes that often, but there was some nuggets in there that definitely unlocked some things for me. Especially some of the more dense harmony stuff. I didn't understand it, but I tried. And I think, like I said before we started taping, falling asleep to fretboard journal in the hopes that some of like Bill Frisell's knowledge will just seep into me. Just exposing myself to some of these like extended chord shapes or like modal explanations where I didn't get it, but when it came time to actually do the work, I was like, oh, I actually am learning. I didn't really realize that I was learning by not understanding it, if that makes sense. And so that kind of unlocked some things and also made me afraid that there were so many things I didn't yet understand.
Yeah. And all this time while you're like torn playing Paganini, are you thinking guitar is going to get me out of this town? Guitar is going to get me to New York or LA, or where are you at?
I don't know. I mean, when I was in college, I was like, I'm going to be a session guitar player. And then that honestly kind of was taken out of me when I got to college, like, because it wasn't that inspiring. And it was more like, can you identify this like Stravinsky concerto or something? And I was just like, I didn't care about it. I was listening to Fleetwood Mac. But then what happened was, during college, I met all these singer-songwriters who were like adjacent to it. And there was this like little music scene in upstate New York, like very, very small. And I just started playing with anyone I could to get experience. And I started playing with a lot of songwriters, and I learned how to be, supportive as a guitarist and take solos, because that's what I was doing in school and doing like at home, like whether it was like jamming with my brother or like just improvising in school. And so after school, I just started playing in everybody's bands and like every capacity. I think at one point I was in like 5 different bands in upstate New York, which is basically all the bands because the scene's like so small, you know.
Yeah.
But I played with like folk players. I played in this kind of jazz quartet where we played at the library. I played in this guy's band who like, it was called Better Pills, and I was doing a lot of like pedal and like wall of sound stuff, and I just wanted so much experience, and I wasn't thinking that like this is what's going to get me out of here. But at a certain point it was like I can't do anything more here. I've played with everybody, and I was just hungry for like more experience and hungry for playing with people who were doing something that I was inspired by, and I kind of had exhausted the resources there. It's a city, it always comes and goes, and there's a really good player there who inspired me, George Muscatello, and like I never got to play with him. I don't know if he's still alive, but I would have liked to. So that was kind of where I was at with everything. And then I met Kevin Morby at a show, and then that was sort of how I ended up in LA. Better Pills opened for him, and it was like out of a movie. I was like, I remember seeing him play in this like small bar, and I was like, we're opening for Kevin Morby. This is huge. Like this is and it's sweet to think about that too now, because I definitely take it for granted, like stuff in it. And so it's good to reminisce about it. But I just went up to him and I was like, hey, like they were playing as a trio, and I was like, if you ever need another guitar player, like for a tour, like I'm not doing anything. I think I said, I was like, I would do that. And he was like, it was like a crazy thing for me to do in hindsight.
Yeah.
Like if somebody said that to me that I had never met, I would be like, okay, cool. You know, sounds good. But he was like, yeah, we had been discussing like at dinner before the show that we really want to have another person in the band. And they had missed playing because Kevin and Justin, Justin plays drums, Justin Sullivan, they were in the Babies before with Cassie, and they were like used to touring with, they were like, we don't want to tour with some guy. We want to tour with like someone who has like a different energy. They didn't want like a hired gun. They wanted like somebody who's going to be in the band and like with a different energy. And and so then like 2 months later, I like joined his band and I moved to LA. It was like insane.
Was this all before he had heard a note of you playing music?
Well, we had opened, so he
Okay.
saw me play, and I was like doing a bunch of like pedal and like soloing stuff, and and then after he was like, "Hey, can you play bass?" And I was like, "Yeah, definitely." And I never touched a bass. I like called my brother, dude. I know. I was like, "Yeah, definitely." The first bass that I borrowed my brother's bass, and it was like this Kramer, and he's like way taller and bigger than me. I couldn't even reach the tuning pegs. I was like, I had to like angle it up to tune it. And so I played bass in Kevin's band for the first like couple of tours and would play a little guitar. And then it kind of just evolved from there.
Did you ever confess that you had never played bass before?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think the best bass players, no, I'm not going to say it. A lot of good bass players are guitar players, but not the best. I can't say that on this podcast, I feel like. Yes,
it's a safe space.
It's a safe space.
Do you enjoy being on the road? I mean, did you just like fall in love with it? I
did, yeah. I was really, really into it. And at this point, I was like in my early 20s. So I had a lot more energy and a different outlook on life. And I really loved it. I loved moving around so much and seeing all these. I had barely traveled growing up. I had never been to Europe. I didn't even think I was ever going to go to Europe. I had been on like one plane at that point in my life, and And so I was totally hooked, and it was amazing. I got to see all these places and play music all the time and meet all these people. And yeah, I was like really overwhelmed and hooked. And yeah, I got hooked. Now I do like the road, but I can't do the 6-week tours anymore.
Yeah.
It's too much.
When you accepted that gig, did you immediately like pack your stuff and say, I'm moving to wherever, New York or LA, or
it was gradual.
Yeah.
It was gradual. Yeah. I mean, we had our first tour that started on the West Coast. I think Kevin and I met, I think it was November or October in the fall. And then I learned all the music. We played one show at Bowery. It was kind of like an audition. And at that point, I had never played to that many people. I was so nervous. Yeah. Now I play Bowery and I'm like not nervous at all because I have way more experience, but it was like so terrifying. Yeah. And after that, and he asked me, and then this tour started in February. And so a partner of mine at the time and I drove to LA, and I kind of put my stuff in storage and started this tour and then found a place to live. And yeah, just stayed. That was almost 10 years ago, which is wild.
That is, I mean, it's crazy. It's a great story though.
It's a good story. Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful. And I met so many, the music scene here is just incredible. And what keeps me here is there's so many incredible players and builders and like amazing creative thinkers. And it's just like, you can't throw a rock without hitting a guitar player who's like incredible and has an amazing philosophy. And I was really fortunate to just meet a lot of people who just kept blowing my mind with guitar. And it still happens. It happens all the time. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And it puts me to work too. 'Cause then I'm like, oh, fuck. I can't get lazy. I feel like if I were to stay here, as long as I stay here, I can't be a lazy player because there are just so many people. And the guitar is like so infinite, and I keep learning that over and over again. Yeah.
You play with like a wide variety of people, and I hope people listening to this will check out, your own recordings as well as, War on Drugs and Perfume Genius and all this other stuff that we'll probably get to. But when did Hand Habits sort of like form?
Well, it was formed a long time ago in upstate New York, and it was a very different iteration back then. Because at the core, I love being in bands. And so when I started writing in songs, it was confusing, I think, in the beginning because I love collaborating, but I didn't have, it was still my band, but I resisted it. And so back then it sounded like a lot more like rockin', and energetic. And then I stopped doing it for a while. And then because I was just playing with everyone else and it wasn't really bringing me the same amount of joy. I also wasn't a confident singer. And so that made things challenging. But then after the first year of touring with Kevin, I spent this summer in Saugerties, New York, house sitting, before I actually moved and got a place in LA. And I was just doing a lot of home recording, and that kind of opened me back up to songwriting because it merged those worlds of exploring and making these soundscapes. And then also, being in my early 20s and having a lot of emotions. And so that opened it up. And then Kevin actually sent some of those recordings that I made to Jeremy, who runs Woodsist Records. And so he put out my first official Hand Habits record in 2017 on Woodsist. Mm-hmm. And then it was back. And I started doing it and focusing my time and splitting time between Kevin's band and my band and doing a lot of opening for him on his tours. And then it's just evolved. And when I left Kevin's band, I had meant to spend, a lot of considerable time with mine. And I did that in 2019 with Placeholder. And then, 2020 happened.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Not touring a whole lot.
no, I did make Funhouse during that time, which was really, really fun and rewarding. And I feel like I had a fortunate experience with that record because I moved into the house that I live in now with Kyle Thomas, and we were just stuck here, and he has a studio. And so he made the record here, and it was a perfect thing to focus on for those first, hard months. But my plan was a little derailed. I had joined Perfume Genius. I was like, okay, I'll do this for a year. I'll open and then go back to doing Hand Habits more. And now playing in Perfume Genius, it's so rewarding. And I've done what I did with Kevin a little bit, where I do a lot of opening for that band and split my time. And when I'm not doing stuff with them, doing stuff with Hand Habits, which was this year, which was really good. But playing in that band has definitely occupied a similar space in my scheduling as Kevin. And it's also just so rewarding. I feel like I've learned so much about music in these years playing with them. And yeah, I've gotten better at music. I know how else to say it. And the reason is because all the guitar parts I have to learn are Blake's parts. And they're they were so challenging for me to learn. And and it's just been so fun to kind of reverse engineer his arrangements with Gregory. And so,
How does that work? Because we're talking about Blake Mills. When Blake does the original recording and then someone has to inherit that, in your case, do you get to talk to Blake, or do you bring it up?
I had known Blake for a couple of years, peripherally at this point, and he was the one who told me that Mike and Alan were going to ask me to play in the band. And I had known Blake from adjacently doing some of the War on Drugs sessions, and I'd hung out with him a couple times, and I had gone over to Sound City, and he played me some of the Perfume Genius record, and he played me the song On the Floor. And it's this 2 stereo, gakko, gakko, gakko. And it's just him. It's just one person. And I was listening and I was like, whoa, who's going to play that? I was like, it's a pretty crazy guitar part. Cause I had seen Perfume Genius a couple times and they had a great band. And I was like, damn, what's the band going to be? And he was like, they're going to ask you to do it. And I was like, oh no. It was both holy shit, that's a dream gig in a lot of senses. And also I'm fucked. I've tricked everybody into thinking that I can do this somehow. And so for some of the songs, and thankfully it was me and Greg, we needed 2 guitar parts because there's a lot going on in a lot of those recordings, and there's so many layers in some of them, and just a lot of atmospheric stuff and rhythmic stuff happening all the time. But yeah, for On the Floor, I had Blake, we had a sectional over FaceTime, and he sent me a video of him doing it. And it was one of those parts where I had to sit down with a metronome and slow it down. And I haven't had to do that since college, but it did come at the perfect time because, we were about to go on all those tours for that record, Set My Heart on Fire, immediately. And then lockdown happened. So I was making a record and just shedding the shit out of the guitar, gearing up for these rehearsals. And then also Greg and I splitting them between the 2 of us helped for a lot of that. So for live, that one part for On the Floor, we do sort of a hocket that kind of makes up the clave sort of feel. And it's not a clave, I don't think, but it sounds like Stevie Wonder. And so, yeah, Greg and I got to know each other as players through reverse engineering those parts that Blake wrote, and spending a lot of time with them, figuring out how to do that.
You mentioned a couple guitars when we first started talking, including the very first one that you got, really. Do you think when you get a gig like this, I got to go buy some new gear, or I'm going to figure out how to do this on that old Strat I've had for 10 plus years?
I thankfully didn't need to buy guitars for this gig because I already had. There's quite a bit of rubber bridge guitar on some of those recordings because Ruben, built it for Blake, and so I think like the first ever rubber bridge guitar was used on Valley, the Perfume Genius song, and so I had already had one, thankfully, and so did Greg actually. Like we had already had them, being like old style nerds, and
do you hang out there?
Yeah, Ruben's become a good friend of mine. I have to go there today, actually, and pick up. I'm going to do some recording. And he was like, I heard you're recording. Do you want to borrow something? And it's very, very sweet. I feel very cool. Super fortunate. But I did have to buy like some pedals. And I did buy this Gelber Strat that I actually didn't use that much for those tours. But yeah, I had to kind of I had to get a couple pedals that the specific, I'm not going to say which one actually.
Okay.
But I had to get this one pedal that was like very reliant on this sort of octave down delay thing. But I like the challenge of trying to figure out how to do something with what I have. And we were fortunate enough to spend a whole month rehearsing because, our tours were pushed back. So I had a lot of time to figure out what to bring to the table. And, and when we were flying, like how to make the things that I have sound like things that I would bring that I, couldn't bring.
Got it. Yeah.
And so it was a fun challenge for sure.
When you're at home or in a studio working on Hand Habit stuff, do you geek out on the recording stuff, as the recording side as much as and production side as much as the guitar side?
Definitely the production side. Recording equipment I get a little less excited about. But I'm about to go in, and I'm going to my friend's studio, Tropico Beauty, and Phil and I like trust Phil Artunian. He's the engineer that I'll be working with for this session. And I definitely know how I want things to sound and will try to ask questions to make sure that will happen. But I also like the idea of, having there be surprises and not knowing, because it never really, really sounds like what I think it's going to sound like.
Yeah.
And that's part of the fun of it. But the production side, definitely. And I'm excited to be home for a couple of months because I just recently got Ableton and got one of Bryce Highland Dynamics preamps, thankfully. So those are really, really good. It's like my first real tube preamp for recording. And yeah.
You're just in tape-op, right?
I was, yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. Talk about imposter syndrome.
Come on. I mean, does Hand Habits, is that just you now? Or could you see yourself in 5 years or 1 year or whenever saying, I'm retiring that moniker and I'm going to do this next chapter? Or is it versatile enough that it's just going to follow you forever?
I think it'll probably follow me forever. I'm definitely going to make another record, and I'm kind of want to go back to what led me there, with just having there be more. This last record I made was I had no plan, and it was just mostly experimental, and a lot of the songs I like, but I wrote them in the studio as a different process. But I could see it, I don't want to say it'll be retired, but I could see taking a long break from songwriting and just focusing on just more improvisational music or composed guitar. But that's the beauty of being able to do both of them, is that when I spend a lot of time in Hand Habits world, I get sick of it. And I get sick of hearing my own voice. I get sick of my thoughts and my story and my narrative, and then make a record like the Duffy Uhlmann record, or go into the studio with other people, or go on tour with Perfume Genius. And I feel really fortunate that I have the ability to do that, because some people are just, session guitar players or just songwriters or just, and the balance is really, it's mutually beneficial for both, I think.
Yeah. Can we do a little poor man's version of Song Exploder here and talk
Sure.
about Under the Water and just because I've listened to that track a lot. I love it. I know lots of other people do too, if Spotify numbers are to be believed. What's on that, and let's just go through the songwriting process.
Well, I wish I could give you more insight on that song, but actually I never touched the session for it.
Okay.
But that song was a co-write with Amelia Meath of Sylvanesso and Nick Sanborn, who's also Sylvanesso. And over lockdown, they did this sort of sweeping, any friends who want to drop in random bits that they have sitting around into a folder, we're going to just maybe make stuff out of it. Because they have a really, really cool studio in North Carolina. And I have so many hours of just me in mole person mode. And and I had this like nylon, little explorational nylon thing that was finger picked. I think it was in some sort of open tuning, and it didn't have words. And I think I was just layering and making these little collages, which I do a lot. And it's part of my practice for sure. And I sent them that one, and then Amelia and Nick just made it into that song. And yeah, people really like it. It's cool.
What's your process when you layer like that? Are you, I'm assuming you're listening to the tracks you're layering on top of, but
Yeah. Well, I am definitely a big looper, and not in a like, beatboxy kind of way, but I know that looper can be kind of a dirty word, but not for the Frizzell heads. And DL4 definitely is a big part of my setup most of the time. But I would just sort of loop in the DAW in that way, like lay down one sort of static chordal, maybe like 3 or 4 chords with finger picking, maybe to a drum machine or something, and then just layer on top of it and see what happens and improvise over it. And it's always been something that I do at home, and just make these like little vignettes, and maybe I'll like add an electric guitar on top of it and then just mess with it in the box. I think for that one specifically, I had just tried to start learning Pro Tools because I've been a Logic person for most of my life. And I was like doing some audio suite stuff and just kind of clicking around and seeing what happens and being free.
Here's a boring but important question. When you do those little snippets, do you tag them? Do you folder? What's your system so that you can refer back to them? It's a mess. No taxonomy to talk about. No.
No, it's a mess. Like maybe once every 2 years or something, I'll go through and try to organize everything. But some of the, like, I have so many folders that are like wordless, instrumental, like experimental, like,
Okay. So you do that much. You do that much at least.
I do that much. Yeah. I'm just plugging my computer in.
Yeah.
I do that much, but no, I wish I had the foresight and the dedication to just actually label stuff. It would make my life a lot easier. But then, I stumble upon something like that, and it's like sort of a grab bag. It's like thrift store in my hardware, in my hard drive. It's like a thrift store,
Yeah. Just
a lot of, it's like record picking, like a lot of shit. And then every once in a while you find a little nugget.
It's a great way to think about it. Do you ever purge, or you never purge?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I'm really into that. I'm like in a purge moment right now too. I like want to delete everything.
Yeah, interesting. How'd the Doubles record come about? That
was definitely a direct result of learning these Perfume Genius songs with Greg. So Greg plays in Perfume Genius too. And as I said, it took 2 guitar players to learn a lot of those arrangements. And And so Greg would come over and we would rehearse like before the rehearsal and just work out our parts and arrange, like decide, oh, you're going to do that top end thing. Like I'll do the slow end thing, or maybe we'll harmonize. And there's this one Perfume Genius song in particular that led to that project, which is called One More Try. And it's this like waltzy kind of dreamy song. And there's this beautiful descending line of just arpeggios, like varying seventh, major, minor seven, down the neck that starts really high. And it's just different inversions. And it's so beautiful. And it's got this tremolo on it. And that one we didn't need to split it up, but I kind of harmonized along with it. And I played the baritone on that one, and Greg played like this kind of weird resonator guitar, actually, that I think it was some sort of custom thing. And we played it really, really slow just to get it tight. And we would just loop it like boom, 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 boom. And it was so rewarding to do that, and just surrendering to the slowness and really, it was like practicing with someone else, which I feel like you don't really get to do that. You know, the home practice with a metronome, and you're going to run your scales or run your triads or run your inversions. It's usually a pretty isolating experience, and to bring that into a musical context, there was just something there that felt so, it was not indulgent, you know, like it was indulgent for us because it felt good, but it's definitely was not about like chops. And it was very like, okay, we have to listen to each other. And so Greg was like, it feels so good to play this. Like we should like cover some, it was originally going to be covers of other songs played really, really slow in that way. But then we just started writing these pieces, and the only criteria was slowness, really. And yeah, like I would write a little piece and then he would come over and write something with it. And it was a really, really wonderful record experience for me. And we recorded it straight to tape, and there's no overdubs on the first side. It's like just us. You can like hear the house clicking because it was warm. It was like, you know, and neither of us knew how to use a tape machine, just figuring it out. Lots of lost takes, but okay. Yeah, like, oh shit, we just recorded over that.
What guitars did you use?
So because it was so slow and indulgent for us, there were not really a lot of limitations with the guitars. And I think I used almost a different guitar in every song. I use the Gelber a lot. The Gelber has an amazing low end. It's got flats on it, and I tune it to C sharp. And the Gaia tone that's in the neck, just like, it's so, the low end's wild. And it's plucky. It like sounds like really, I don't know. I love it. And I used that one. I used this Waterloo that I had made for me with Waterloo, and I tuned it sort of just random. Like I was like, it's like a bunch of octaves, and like if you strummed it, it would sound bad, but then I put some putty on it and muted it, and so it sounds sort of like a marimba or something.
Wait, what, like silly putty?
Yeah.
Is this the next thing after rubber bridge guitars? Are we all going to be buying silly putty? Maybe. Okay. Well, okay. We won't give away that trade secret, but what did you ask from Waterloo that wasn't off the shelf?
I don't even remember, to be honest.
Okay.
I know that the neck is like one of the V, it's like more V shaped. But it was a while ago and I don't remember. I wish I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Suddenly you've gotten very secretive with us.
It's just because I don't know. My memory's not. I do recall seeing Margaret Glaspie at the performance that she did for you guys, and it's the same body.
Yeah.
It's that body.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that's like more custom is just the neck. I'm not really sure about the bracing, but yeah, wish I did. I should probably check.
She was just here with another Waterloo. So
yeah, no, it was the same. It's like the same pick guard and the same body. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. You recorded this where?
We recorded at Greg's brother's house.
Greg's brothers. Okay.
Yeah, we borrowed a Tascam 388 from my friend Chris Messina and figured out how to use it and set up. His brother's out of town, so we just set up for 3 days and set up some mics. And
we haven't talked about amps at all. We talked about plenty of electric guitars, though. Do you go direct? What are you doing?
I had used this Magnatone, this Etsy 64 Etsy Magnatone with the pitch vibrato that I've recently sold. Because I never really used it. It was just, I didn't want to take it out of my house. It was heavy. I was afraid to drive with it because it's so old. So, but I just play a Princeton. I play a Princeton that Fender hooked me up with. And I haven't gone down the amp wormhole, really. It's just hasn't, I like working with something that's light and that I, don't break my back carrying or my wallet.
You mentioned that there's at least one Hand Habits record to come.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we at with that?
I'm going into the studio on Thursday, and I've done a couple songs already. Yeah, and I'm bringing the band in, and I haven't done a band record where we're playing live since Placeholder. So I'm really excited, and we have a good vibe. I mean, me, Greg, and then Alan from Perfume Genius and Tim from Perfume Genius we've been playing music together in all these different iterations for the past like almost 4 years. So there's definitely a language there. And it's the first time that I've had that like across many different projects that are really varying, and that nice like mind meld thing has started to happen where I can sort of anticipate where Tim's going to offset the beat, and like I can kind of get in there, and I really trust them musically. And so yeah, we're going to go in on Thursday and see what happens.
When you get to that point of chemistry, does it change the way you're writing songs because you can lean on bandmates more? Maybe.
I don't know. I guess I don't know if I have the answer until we get in there, but if the way that I've written has changed, I don't think I'm aware of it. But I do know that on this next record, I want there to be more sections where I'm like soloing and taking more guitar situation, just like leaving more space to play, because people like that, I guess. I didn't realize that. I mean, on all my records, I don't really play out that much because I get to do that in everyone else's band. That's sort of my role. It's like the guitar solo person. And so I don't need to do that in my songs. But when we were just on tour with the National, there's this one song that we open up live, and I just kind of do what I do, which is, take a solo or whatever. And people like guitar still.
They do.
They like it. It's so cool, Jason. I thought that people didn't like it.
Every few years, there's a news article saying people don't like it, but then it somehow keeps kicking.
I know. I think I was just hanging out with the wrong crowd,
Well, now you're clearly hanging out with the right crowd.
Yeah. A lot of guitars.
Yeah. And if anybody has made it this far and wants to dive in and see you play, I mean, both as in Perfume Genius and Hand Habits, you've played at KXP right down the street from me here in Seattle.
Yeah, love them so much.
They do a good job filming.
They're incredible.
Sometimes. Yeah, they are.
They're incredible. It always feels like visiting like an aunt's house when we stop there.
Yeah. Well, you can do laundry, right?
Do laundry, take a shower, drink some coffee, see Cheryl,
Yeah.
A whole lot.
It's a good crew.
Is your studio right down the street?
I'm in Ballard. I'm a few miles north, to be honest. But
I love Ballard.
Yeah, it's all right. come by next time.
I
If you're
will.
not
I
doing
would love
KXP. Are you doing any other like guitar for hire stuff that we should know about?
Just the Greg and I'm going to play some shows for that record. Perfume Genius is making another record in January, so that will be taking up my month. I'm trying to think of what I've done recently. I've just been on tour, so it's been mostly Hand Habits over the last 3 months. Oh, Emile Mosieri, he's a great composer and songwriter, and Hacks and Cloak, aka Bobby Krillick, was producing his record. I was just making a record with them. That was really, really fun. Really, really fun. I love being in the studio. I'm happy to be home and not on the road because I'm feeling like all the hours that I spent last year sort of going so far out of what it means to play guitar for me, just experimenting different tunings, like new things, like new, I don't know, all of it, just all the stuff that seems excessive. It's seeming like it's going to congeal now, and I'm excited to apply it.
And I think it was before we started recording, you said when you get back from being on the road for a long time, you have to just become a mole person and like go hide somewhere.
Yeah. Is it okay to say mole person? I don't know if that's like offensive. I mean, like, can we still say that?
Are there mole people? They would be offended?
I don't know.
I think it just offends the moles.
That's true. Yeah, totally. But yeah, I'm excited. And just with Hand Habits, like I'm going to take like the whole year to make the record. So like, I want to apply. I want to try to merge all the worlds, for this one, which might be a disaster or it might be really cool.
I bet it'll be really cool.
We'll see.
Meg, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. This has been so great. I'm such a fan.
All right, that was my talk with Meg Duffy of Hand Habits. I hope you enjoyed it. Go run out and buy your silly putty and report back. And stay tuned as always for another batch of great episodes coming up. If you like the show, please subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review. And if you really love it, we have a Patreon for the show where you can listen to the entire episode ad-free. It's a great way to support all that I do. Till next time.